Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you guys to another episode of the Boombox Guru. I'm your host, LB. So, today, man, I know it's been a few weeks, maybe about a month or so, since I've actually done one of these videos. But we got another album review for you guys today, and I'm really excited to do this album review, man, because it's a record that I recently got. I recently purchased. I found it online, and I'm just excited to really talk about this album, man, because I've actually grown to like this record, and it's actually become one of my favorites from this band. And the album that I want to talk about today is this record right here. Hope you guys can see that really good. This is "Make Them Die Slowly" by White Zombie, released in 1989 on Caroline Records. So, trying to make sure I can get it. I know there's a bit of a glare sometimes. Make sure you see that real good. Here's the back cover. I actually have a T-shirt with this. This was White Zombie. I guess it's like their mascot at the time. I actually have a T-shirt with it with that whatever that zombie looking thing is on there. I just have a T-shirt of that, man. But yeah, "Make Them Die Slowly" by White Zombie, man. I found this on Amazon not too long ago for a pretty good price. Really excited to have this, man. But yeah, so in talking about this album, man, this was White Zombie's second full length studio record. They had released the album before that in '87 called Soul Crusher, and prior to that, they had released about three EPs: Guys on Voodoo Moon, we'll see Pig Heaven / Slaughter to the Grave, and Psycho Head Blowout, I believe. And just a little brief history on White Zombie. White Zombie was a band that was a heavy metal band that was started in the mid '80s by Rob Cummings, who is now most famously known as Rob Zombie, and his girlfriend at the time, bassist Shauna Reynolds, who is also better known as Sean Usalt. And they started the band, I believe, in 1985. Both of them were attending college. They was attending this art college in New York City, I believe. It was called Parsons, I believe, and that's where they met, and that's where they started the band. I'm not sure if Sean was even a musician at the time. I think she might have been there for art, uh, to that effect. I don't know. I think Rob might have been the one that got her and like told her, yeah, maybe you should try playing bass or something like that. I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. But yeah, they started the band, and both of them were the most consistent members of the band because they had a revolving door of guitarists and drummers. Ivan the Prune, who you guys will see in the thumbnail of this video, he's the gentleman that's standing behind both Rob and Sean in the thumbnail, as well as this guy right here. I hope you guys can see that. This is him right here. But he was the drummer. I think he joined around the Pig Heaven Slaughter to the Grave EP, and he was with the band all the way up until Le Sexorcisto when he left, I think, during the touring of that album. But for the most part, Rob and Sean were the most constant members of the band during this tenure. And what a lot of people don't know is that White Zombie, maybe not, maybe, well, the die-hard fans, but I think a lot of other people don't know that White Zombie actually started out as more of an underground New York City noise rock band. And Rob has said in interviews that the only reason they sounded like that is because they didn't have the best equipment and they didn't have the greatest production, but they were lumped into that whole underground New York City noise rock scene. They kind of sounded like Sonic Youth, but maybe not as good. Yeah, I guess that's the best way. They were a bit more. They were a bit more chaotic in my personal opinion, but around 1989, when they dropped this album, "Make Them Die Slowly," the band had decided to transition into a heavy metal band, and this record was their first attempt at that. What's interesting about this album is that the critics and the early White Zombie fans did not like this record. They didn't like it. I mean, I don't think the band members really liked this album. The critics and the early White Zombie fans, they saw "Make Them Die Slowly" as the band selling out because they were going for the more heavy metal route. And the band members really don't like this record because the production on it is not great. And that's just the fact. The record does not have great production. It was produced by Bill Laswell. Bill Laswell, I'm not all that familiar with him, but I do know him for producing albums from a lot of funk artists and funk bands that I listen to. There's a heavy metal band that I have, a CD I have called the band's called Slave Master, Under the Six. It was a heavy metal band that featured members from like Parliament, Funkadelic, and so forth. And I know he produced that. And I know he produced a record by Bootsy Collins that featured Buckethead, an early appearance from guitarist Buckethead. But I think he was more considered like an avant-garde type guy. He had his finger in a lot of like, I guess, like experimental jazz artists, experimental funk and progressive music. But he produced this record. So a little bit of history. This album was actually recorded like 3 times. Sean Salt said in an interview that they recorded it 3 times. The first time, and I'm getting this from Wikipedia. I have it right here. Let's see. Here it is. This is an interview that Sean did in 2010, where she said that we made it once, it sounded good, Rob hated it. We made it again, the songs are getting more and more uptight and overwritten, and got interrupted halfway through. Bill Laswell now wanted to make the record and start from scratch. We made it a 3rd time, and it was the worst version of all 3. I hate the way this record sounds. Not to mention my memories of Laswell sitting me down. Excuse me, freaking fly. Not to mention my memories of Laswell sitting me down and making me play in a chair, having me hit the strings ever so lightly so I wouldn't clip the note. What a pile of BS. So yeah, she talks about her experience recording this record. I remember there was somewhere where she said that she just hates the way that this record sounds. I don't see it right now, but yeah, man, it was their first album that was influenced by heavy metal. I think Ivan the Prune, I remember watching an interview that he did where he said that they went to a Slayer show and they were so captivated by that performance that all of them just decided right then and there, like, yeah, that this is the route that we should go. Also, Rob had started really getting into Metallica a lot. I think Ivan the Prune had put him on to like Ride the Lightning, and I think during the early years when they were touring, that was one of the tapes that they constantly listened to all the time. So that became a big influence. And that's also another interesting point because this record actually sounds like it sounds like Black Sabbath meets early Metallica. If you've ever heard some of the early Metallica stuff, like maybe prior to Kill 'Em All, it does have a bit of that influence, man. Because there's moments in a lot of the songs where they'll start off like full throttle, fast paced, very thrash influence. For instance, the album opener, Demon Speed. Demon Speed, I mean, the title of that song is self-explanatory. I mean, it kicks off full speed ahead. But then you got songs like Murder World, where it starts off fast, but then they have those moments where they kind of slow things down and they kind of go into this kind of doomy, sludgy, like almost stoner metal approach. And Rob does remind me a little bit of James Hetfield during those early years, man. And speaking of Rob's vocal style on this album, I feel that this was where Rob was starting to sort of develop more of his signature style that he would have on the later successful Rob Zombie albums. He's not quite there, but if you've ever listened to like Soul Crusher or the prior EPs, Rob's style was really different. His voice was more high pitched, and I don't know if that was because of the poor production that they had, or if that was just Rob's style because he was a bit younger. But by this time, his vocal register has gotten a little bit lower, so it's somewhat reminiscent, or you could say like a precursor to the style that he would have on Le Sexorcisto, except that it's not as refined. So it's kind of like a blend of his early style and his transitioning into that more kind of, like how he performed on Welcome to Planet MF and Thunderkiss. It's kind of like in between there. But that's kind of where he's at, and that's kind of as a whole where this album Make Them Die Slowly kind of falls, because it's exactly like I said. It's a transition because you can still hear that sort of noisy slight chaos from the previous records, but you can also hear where they're headed, because and you have to really listen to the Soul Crusher album and those EPs to kind of really understand what I'm saying. Because if you listen to those early EPs, which all of that stuff is available on Spotify or whatever streaming platform that you listen to, you can easily go listen to them, or you can go and check out the box set. It came from New York City, which I have back here. I should have grabbed it for this video, but I didn't. I have that box set that has all their early material, but you have to really listen to the early material to really understand what I'm saying. Because Rob back then in the early days, he just had this weird, like twisted, almost kind of high pitched vocal tone that he would do. Like if you listen to that early stuff, man, he sounded like he was spitting some kind of weird, twisted spoken word poetry. Yeah, and the music on there was very noisy, and it was very chaotic. Like there was some moments where you just really don't know, okay, what's going on here? I mean, this sounds so interesting, but I really don't know what's going on. But by the time that the band got to Make Them Die Slowly, the you started to get less chaos and more structure. Like the songs started to become more structured. And I believe Rob even mentioned in an interview somewhere where people talked about this being a metal album. Yes, here it is right here on Wikipedia. It says, in an interview with Cream Presents Thrash Metal, Sean suggested that the new stuff is pretty close to being metal. That's her referencing at the time when this album was coming out. While Rob claimed, I don't know if you would really call it metal, but there's a lot more focus to it. The songs are more like songs, which I can agree with that, because I mean, just go check out the Soul Crusher album. Go check out the song called Rat Mouth from the previous record, Soul Crusher. And then go listen to like maybe Demon Speed from this record, or Acid Flesh or Disaster Blaster from Make Them Die Slowly. And you'll see the difference. There's more structure and focus on this album. And that brings me to the next point. The production. The production has always been a big point of contention for most people who have like kind of viewed this album negatively. Now, I'm not one of those people that view this album negatively, but the production was not very good. As as I said, when I was reading what Sean Yusalt had said in that interview about the production, yeah, the production is not the greatest. I think the biggest issue that I have with the production is the fact that the guitar is very thin. And while I'm talking about the guitar, I want to mention that the guitarist on this album was John Ricci, this gentleman right here. And that's not to be confused with John Ricci, who played in the heavy metal band Exciter. I just want to clarify that. This is a different guy. But yeah, this is the only album that he did with White Zombie, because I believe he ended up getting diagnosed with carpal tunnel syndrome. So he couldn't play guitar anymore. He ended up having to leave the band not long after this album came out, and that's when Jay Younger came in. And I wish I had the God of Thunder EP, because I would like to talk about how he came into the band and really really refined their sound. But getting back to Make Them Die Slowly, the guitar sound is very thin, and that's one of the biggest issues that I really can point out in the album. I wish the guitar had a lot more punch to it, man. I don't know why Bill Laswell decided to go with a thin guitar sound, but at the same time, though, and this might sound a bit contradictory, but at the same time, it kind of does work for the album. And the reason why I say that is because the band was going in with the intentions of making a heavy metal record. That's what they were doing. But because the production wasn't as great as it was, it came out sounding like this weird, somewhat avant-garde metal album. So as much as the band don't like this record in the way it sounds, and you understand why they don't, because they're the band, they're the ones that are recording the record, they're the ones that went in with this vision. It actually worked in their favor as far as like in the underground music scene, because to a degree, and I think this mainly applies to fans who got introduced to White Zombie through Le Sexorcisto, Thunder Kiss and Black Sunshine, and who are more familiar with that, and as well as Astro Creep 2000. This record is somewhat of a precursor to that era, and but it still kind of holds true to where they were coming from as far as like that underground noise rock scene. So essentially, yeah, the production on here is not good. Yeah, it would have been nice if it had been better, but it gives the album a unique edge. And nowadays, in retrospect, a lot of people, even critics, are going back and they're reassessing Make Them Die Slowly, and they're viewing this as probably one of the most unique metal albums to ever be released, which I think is really interesting because, like I said, the band hate this album. They don't like the way it sounded. I mean, they hate it. But fans like me, we listen to this record and it's like, you know what? It's interesting. Yes, the production ain't the best, but man, it kind of sounds weird and unique, and it makes it seem so different from what other metal bands were doing at the time. So I don't know. I guess in a lot of ways it was kind of a blessing in disguise for them, because it wasn't like a sharp contrast between their previous record. This is the true example of when a band is like transitioning to something else, when they're evolving. You get a real evolution of where White Zombie was gonna head next. So I think that Make Them Die Slowly is definitely an important piece into White Zombie's history because of that. And when I was doing a little bit of research going into doing this album review, I was reading other people's reviews. I've never seen a bad review from this album, maybe except for the reviews that were done about it back in the day. But thus far, I went on Sputnik Music, I was on Racher Music, I looked at the reviews on Amazon where I purchased this CD. Everywhere I was looking, people, they admitted that, yeah, the production is poor, it's messy, but at the same time, it's a very unique album. And I think that's something that's very interesting. I don't think you get too many albums in music where you're like, yeah, the production sucks, but still, this is a great record and it's still interesting. I don't think you really get that. And even for myself, man, it took a minute for me to really get this record, because the first time that I actually heard Make Them Die Slowly was when I purchased the It Came From in New York City box set. But it's only been recently where I have been streaming it a few times on Spotify, and I don't know what happened. Maybe since my purchase of that box set, my musical taste has grown even more. But somewhere along the line, it clicked with me when I was listening to it. Somewhere along the line, it just clicked with me. Like, hey, like this is kind of weird and unique. I like it, and I kind of get into like weird and unique music. You know what I'm saying? If it resonates with me, and something about Make Them Die Slowly just resonated with me as far as like the weirdness and uniqueness. It's just a very interesting record that they inadvertently created one of the most unique metal albums to ever be released. And in some cases, it kind of reminds me of Voivod a little bit. And when I say Voivod, I don't mean like they sound like Voivod. It's just that if you think about Voivod, for instance, Voivod's first album, War and Pain, that came out in '84, that is still one of the most unique metal albums of all time. Like, I guess you could kind of lump Voivod into like thrash metal, but if you listen to that record, that they weren't doing what other thrash metal bands were doing. That record was in a lot of ways, that record kind of had a lot in common with noise music, because the music on there was very noisy and chaotic. Now, White Zombie's earlier material may have more in comparison with that album, but this being their metal debut, it's not as noisy and it's not as chaotic, but it's just that weirdness, that kind of quasi weirdness that it possesses. It kind of just has to me, it just kind of fits sort of in that same lane as far as like unique metal albums. So that's why I dig it so much. But it would be cool to like talk to some of the members. I know you can't really talk to Rob because Rob is Rob Zombie now, but it would be cool to really kind of talk to the other members of the band. I don't know where John Ricci is at this moment. But it would be cool to talk to Sean and Ivan and just ask them how do they feel about people really considering this one of White Zombie's masterpieces, because they can't stand the record because how poorly produced it was. But it would be interesting to get their take on how their opinion on how it feels to have a faction of fans of White Zombie who actually consider this to be one of their masterpieces. And people do consider this to be one of White Zombie's best records, and that's just really cool, aside from the poor production and whatever, man. And speaking back on the guitar sound, I know the guitar sounds thin on a few songs, but I don't know if it was a mastering issue or maybe the band got a little bit more money to get better production. I don't know, but it kind of sounds like as you get further into the album, the guitar starts to kind of sound a little bit better. At the beginning, with Demon Speed, Disaster Blaster, the beginning of the album, that first half of the album, it's like, yeah, the guitar was a little thin, but then when you get to like Murder World and then Revenge, and of course Acid Flesh is one of my favorites on this album. It kind of feels like the guitar sound kind of got slightly better. So I don't know if that was a mixing and mastering issue where they just mixed it in a little bit better as best they could to make it sound better. But I don't know, man. There's moments where the guitar comes in and it packs a little bit of a punch. And I also like that the bass, Sean Usalt's bass is very prominent on here as well, which makes sense because Bill Laswell is a bassist. So that makes a lot of sense too. But, I think I've talked long enough about this album. I don't want this to be like an hour-long video. But, yeah, Make Them Die Slowly by White Zombie, man. Really enjoyed this record. I highly recommend this to anybody who wants to get a glimpse of White Zombie's pre-Geffen years. I think this would be a great record to start out with, or as well as the other records, man. Prior to this. Although remember, the prior records are way weirder than this one. But I highly recommend this. And personally, being a fan of White Zombie, them being one of my favorite bands, I consider this to be a masterpiece within White Zombie's catalog too. I really enjoy it. I think they put out one of the most interesting metal albums in history, in my personal opinion. And I'm glad to see that this record has gotten more recognition, that the appraisal of it has grown in the years to come. But yeah, definitely check this record out. It's on Spotify. I don't know about other streaming platforms. I assume that if it's on Spotify, it might be on other platforms. But stream it, check it out. Also, be sure to check out the box set. It came from NYC, where it compiles all that early White Zombie material. But yeah, just a great record. And yeah, that's it, man. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review of White Zombie's Make Them Die Slowly. I'm glad to finally have this album in my collection. It's definitely one of the most unique metal albums out there. And I hope you guys will go and check it out for yourselves. If you do, let me know. Hit the comment section. Tell me what you thought of it, whether you liked it or whether you didn't like it. I'm all ears. I'm open to hear your opinions on it, man. But that's it for this album review. And hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, do me a huge favor. Hit that thumbs up and give me a like. Helps with the algorithm. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap that bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop new content. I want to give a huge thank you to everybody that's been watching the channel, that's been supporting, watching my videos. I truly appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.